Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a chilling reality, a monster who didn't lurk in dark alleyways, but hid right in plain sight. We're looking at the rise and fall of Ted Bundy. This is a case that completely rewired how law enforcement, criminal psychologists, and honestly, all of us understand serial predators.
So, ask yourself a question as we start. What makes a serial killer truly terrifying? Is it that classic horror movie trope, the strange masked figure lurking in the shadows waiting to strike? Or is it actually something way more insidious? Like, is it the person smiling at you in broad daylight, offering a friendly greeting, just blending seamlessly into everyday life? Keep that exact distinction in mind as we trace the facts of this deeply unsettling story.
Ted Bundy is the ultimate, terrifying example of a double life. Born in Burlington in 1946, he was, by all the standards of the time, the absolute picture of an ordinary, successful guy. He was super intelligent, well-spoken, an ambitious law student, and even active in local politics. People genuinely liked him. But right beneath that wholesome boy-next-door facade was a calculating predator who systematically targeted and abducted vulnerable women.
You see, his absolute greatest weapon wasn't a knife or a gun or even brute force. It was that double life. By the early 1970s out in Washington state, he had totally mastered the art of appearing perfectly normal. He used his charm, his good looks, and this vibe of total approachability as a literal weapon. His goal wasn't just to overpower someone, it was to gain their sympathy, and most crucially, their unquestioning trust before they ever even realized they were in danger.
Let's look at how he actually pulled this off. He had this methodical, chillingly polite three-step routine, usually targeting areas right near busy college campuses where young people felt safe. Step 1, a friendly, completely non-threatening approach. Step 2, a simple request for help. Something super mundane like asking someone to load a few heavy books into his car. And then, tragically, Step 3, the abduction. He absolutely weaponized our basic human instinct to be decent and helpful.
To make absolutely sure these young women dropped their guard, he went to astonishing lengths to fake vulnerability. He would literally wear fake injuries. He'd put a perfectly healthy arm in a sling or a cast, or he'd hobble around struggling on crutches. Think about it. When a polite, handsome law student on crutches drops his books right in front of you, human nature kicks in. You stop and help. Bundy understood that psychological trigger intimately, and he exploited it flawlessly.
As young women started vanishing, investigators desperately canvassed for witnesses, and what they heard was incredibly unsettling. People didn't report seeing some creepy lurker or a suspicious outsider. No, they just remembered seeing a friendly, helpful guy named Ted hanging around. Because he didn't look like a threat, nobody's brain processed him as one. That simple, totally common description completely shattered the police's preconceived ideas of how dangerous criminals act in public spaces. As time went on, things rapidly escalated. He didn't just stay put in Washington state. He became this highly mobile predator, totally taking advantage of the fact that back in the 1970s, police databases weren't connected at all. He traveled extensively, striking across states like Utah and Colorado, leaving his victims in heavily wooded, remote areas. Investigators from different jurisdictions slowly started to realize they were tracking a traveling phantom, but they had absolutely zero clue who he actually was. But that carefully constructed facade finally cracked in 1975 during what should have been a completely routine traffic stop. When the police pulled Bundy over and looked inside his car, they didn't find law books or campaign flyers. They found a truly sinister toolkit: handcuffs, rope, burglary tools, stuff that had absolutely no business being in the trunk of a promising young student. That chilling discovery was the crucial missing link, and it led right to his first arrest and eventual kidnapping conviction. Now, you'd probably think that 1975 arrest would be the end of the story, right? Not even close. It was actually just a spark for a completely unprecedented sequence of chaos. Over the next 3 years, Bundy turned standard legal proceedings into a wild, nationwide manhunt. He proved that his mobility, his brains, and his absolute refusal to be locked up made him a uniquely dangerous threat to society. Honestly, the details of his escapes are almost hard to believe, and they really expose some massive flaws in the justice system back then. During a hearing in Aspen, Colorado, he was allowed to go to the courthouse law library totally unrestrained so he could prep his own defense. So what does he do? He just opens a second-story window and jumps right out to freedom. After they caught him, he went on a crazy starvation diet just so he could squeeze through a tiny light fixture hole in his jail cell's ceiling. He slipped out completely undetected and made a beeline for Florida. This unbelievable string of evasions reached a brutal and tragic climax in Florida in 1978. Now that he was totally untethered from the law, the charming facade was entirely gone. In the dead of night, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house near Florida State University. In a rapid, frenzied attack, he assaulted several young women, tragically killing 2 of them, before moving on to brutally attack another victim just a short distance away that exact same night. It was incredibly brazen, and it shocked the entire nation.
His nationwide reign of terror did finally end, but it wasn't with some brilliant cinematic mastermind standoff. He was simply caught driving a stolen car and acting suspicious when a patrol officer randomly ran his plates. After a quick scuffle on the street, he was arrested, and this time, there was no charm that could save him. The overwhelming physical evidence tying him to both the stolen car and those horrific Florida attacks meant he wasn't slipping away again.
When it was finally time for his murder trial down in Florida, Bundy just couldn't resist the spotlight. Driven by pure narcissism, he turned a grave legal proceeding into an absolute circus. He actually used his law background to represent himself. He cross-examined police officers, questioned witnesses directly, and basically played right to the TV cameras. He genuinely, arrogantly believed he could charm a jury the exact same way he'd manipulated his victims for years.
But despite all the courtroom theatrics and manipulation, the science and the brave survivors spoke a whole lot louder. The survivor testimonies were incredibly powerful, but there was one piece of forensic evidence that really sealed his fate: bite mark analysis. Forensic dentistry was a pretty novel tool in courts back then, but it definitively linked the unique impression of his teeth to the injuries found on the victims at the sorority house. That undeniable physical proof finally got him a guilty verdict and a death sentence.
This long, exceptionally dark chapter in American criminal history finally closed on January 24, 1989. After more than a decade of exhaustive legal appeals, endless jailhouse interviews with behavioral scientists, and non-stop media coverage, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison.
In the days right before his execution, in this desperate final attempt to buy just a little more time by offering information, he finally dropped the act completely. He confessed. He officially admitted to the brutal murders of 30 young women across several different states between 1974 and 1978. But here's the truly terrifying part. Investigators and profiling experts widely agree that the actual scale of his crimes is probably much, much higher. It's a horrific secret he ultimately took to the grave.
Before we wrap up this explainer, we really need to look at exactly why he was so dangerous and why this case remains such a cornerstone of criminal psychology. Bundy inadvertently knowed the blueprint for the modern predator. He hid behind a mask of normalcy, manipulated our basic human empathy, bypassed high-security jails through sheer audacity, and completely exploited state lines. He quite literally forced law enforcement to rewrite the book on how they profile and track violent criminals.
And that brings us to our final, and definitely most terrifying takeaway. The lasting legacy of this case is how it fundamentally shifted the way we view danger in our society. Monsters don't always hide in the shadows waiting in the dark. Sometimes they walk right out in broad daylight. They give you a warm smile and they politely ask for your help to gain your trust. So the question I'll leave you to chew on is this: how often do we mistake a dangerous predator for a friendly face in the light? Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this complex material today. Keep learning, keep your eyes open, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.